It's that time of year again! And 2025 unleashed so many action movies upon us that I honestly had more trouble than usual keeping up with new releases. I mean, look at that! There are several reasons for that, but I think one of them is linked to a shift in the industry. With the multiplication of streaming platforms and the fact that genre productions are more easily identifiable and therefore likely to sell and find their audience faster, the number of action films keeps going up. With that rise comes of course the need for films to stand out. As usual then, the goal of this video is not to present an exhaustive list of action movies released in 2025, nor is it to rank them. I just want to explore how action as a genre has continued to astonish, thrill, surprise, experiment, and even move us. And there is much to discuss. Although action films have been coming out virtually non-stop throughout the year, American blockbusters whose main genre is action have been few and far between outside of the now traditional superhero flicks, and of course, Avatar: Fire and Ash. James Cameron's third trip to Pandora is once again something of an anomaly in today's landscape, a large-scale, bigger-than-life melodrama that harkens back to the days of classic Hollywood with themes of faith, family, and resistance. Fire and Ash is clearly the most action-packed installment, taking less than 30 minutes to reintroduce all its narrative threads before plunging into non-stop spectacle. And since action is the subject at hand here, it must be said that Cameron remains a master of legibility and immersion, delivering breathtaking set pieces that benefit from a perfect sense of geography and that exploit the unique environments of Pandora. The finale switches back and forth between the land, the sea and the air, and even turns into a very stimulating platformer in its last stretch. The other Hollywood action blockbusters that did come out this year were relative disappointments, either artistically or commercially. My most anticipated one, personally, was Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning, which did not live up to expectations, especially in terms of narrative and character work, as it slowly turned into a repetitive hagiographic send-off for Ethan Hunt. The film contains fewer action scenes than its predecessors, but the two main ones are indeed breathtaking achievements in terms of cinematography and logistics. I liked the final death-defying plane stunts well enough, but the mid-film submarine set piece largely outclasses it in my opinion, creating a self-contained, dialogue-free, high-stakes sub-narrative that pushes the boundaries of what underwater action and suspense can be. This is what a franchise of this scale can bring to the genre, and I'm glad it did here once again. Other high-profile Hollywood actioners included the John Wick spin-off film Ballerina, unofficially directed by franchise creator Chad Stahelski, after the reliably unremarkable Len Wiseman seemingly failed to deliver what was needed. Let's see what film critic and podcaster Jordan Crucchiola thought about it.
I'm here to tell you about one word, ballerina, and that one word can be summed up by two words. Which two words, you ask? Which two words? Is it flamethrower fight? Could that be 3 words? Is it ice skate fight? Could that also be 3 words? Is it grenade fight? It could be any of those things that I just suggested because Ballerina is the most blitzkrieg action movie of the year, built within the studio framework. I don't know why the people didn't turn out for it. I don't know why the masses of John Wick did not say we are in wholeheartedly for this, because after 4 epic John Wick movies, somehow Ballerina still managed to deliver novel action set piece after set piece, and then there are the most important 3 words of all in the entire equation: Ana de Armas. Ballerina, action movie of the year in 2025, y'all. Style, substance, sexy. Check it out if you missed it.
Stop filming me!
Edgar Wright's The Running Man was a fine studio film, benefiting from a propelling pace and a few good performances, but which felt less impactful than it should have been, thematically speaking. Perhaps updating the technological control of the network to include the internet and social media more centrally could have made the film feel less old school. It's an easy watch, however, and the action and stunts are solid, though nothing particularly stands out either. What is there to say about TRON Ares, the 3rd installment of a franchise that was never designed to be one? It's pretty to look at and listen to for sure, but given the visual possibilities of the TRON universe, the film sorely lacks in awe-inducing kinetic experiments. Surely, they could have come up with something other than destroying all those pinball machines. Look at that. What a shame. One should turn to world cinema to find more memorable 2025 blockbusters. India, of course, has released a few, though I found Indian mass entertainers generally less gripping this year compared to the last couple of years. A few productions did stand out.
Get ready for war.
The massive War 2, starring 2 of the country's biggest stars, is an exercise in big budget excess, the likes of which we have rarely seen. Nothing makes much sense on any level, and the story is indeed paper thin, but the way each scene is trying to one-up the one that came before is a sight to behold. Granted, cartoonish action is not everyone's cup of tea, but if you find yourself on its wavelength, the film clearly does not lack generosity. More accomplished artistically, and for me just as entertaining, was Rishabh Shetty's Kantara, a Legend, Chapter 1, a visually stunning mythological epic. The Kannada language blockbuster delves into primordial beliefs and the tensions between power, freedom, love, and mankind's relationship to nature and the old gods. The first half is quite funny, including cool action scenes like this one, and majorly entertaining set pieces, such as the wooden tower one. In the second half, the film takes a more serious turn, culminating into an all-out war between supernaturally possessed warriors. As far as Indian blockbusters go, Kantara is the complete package. It's sort of a prequel sequel to the 2022 film of the same name, which is also recommended. In Kollywood, director Kartik Subbaraj, whose amazing Jigardanda Double X blew my mind back in 2023, was back this year with her Retro, a somewhat messier film that suffers from structural problems and questionable quality control in terms of martial arts, but which stands out with some genuinely unique moments like the Chinese Shadows fight or the dazzling, dizzying 15-minute one-take that keeps swinging back and forth between genres. One of the most exciting moments of the cinematographic year for me. Lokesh Kanagaraj, who I greatly admire as a filmmaker, was back as well with the Rajinikanth vehicle Coolie, an unfortunate disappointment in terms of action. But if you're just looking for cool music, slick directing, and the Rajni swagger, then this might be for you. In Tollywood, superstar Balaya headlined
Daaku Maharaaj.
an incredibly good-looking film that falls too quickly into the pangs of mass entertainers' predictability, but which does contain striking scenes, such as the spellbinding fight in the forest. My personal favorite Indian blockbuster this year might actually be Madharaasi, another Tamil language film, probably because of the commanding physical presence of Vidyu Jamwal as one of the bad guys. His hospital action scene sort of represents an ideal of Indian action style, full of stylistic mannerisms, but still a showcase for the actor's incredible expertise. The film was a commercial failure, which I think is a shame. As for the Hindi language, Sunny Deol-led action thriller Jaat, it certainly stood as one of India's most violent masala entertainers of the year. Let me give the mic to my friend Christoph Kellerbach, also known as the European man who has seen the most Indian movies in theaters.
Violence in general is on the rise these last couple of years when it comes to Indian action cinema, but another trend is the combination of styles, of mixing the North Indian Bollywood approach with a South Indian flair. Like for example Jawan with Shah Rukh Khan did very well in 2023. And in 2025 no other movie combined these styles better than Jaat. And light-hearted half of Jaat, with goons flying in every direction in slow motion, almost feels like a new version of the classic punch-em-up cinema of Bud Spencer and Terence Hill. But then the second half, the themes get quite a bit darker and heavier. Jaat gets even more violent, while militaristic and patriotic themes get mixed into the narrative. All the while, Malineni serves up car chases and ultra-stylish police station brawls. Then comes the climax, in which Deol goes full-on commando and destroys a small army, while doing his best to look cool in every shot, a feat he easily manages thanks to Malineni's stylized direction that boosts the Masala Vusha approach to the max. Bodies get punched and fly a dozen meters to smash into crates. Suddenly no goon knows how to use a gun, and Deol murders a ton of bad guys in creative slow-mo and physics-defying ways. Jaat is the kind of movie that exists because people thought, how can we push the 80s action attitude of Schwarzenegger and Stallone even further? And of course, the happy ending is thanks to a communal lynching. That's just the kind of movie Jaat is. It's loud, it's wild, and it rests perfectly on that narrow border between very silly and very badass. It's exactly the kind of movie that old-school action movie badasses from the West wish they could do.
In Korea, director Kang Hyun-chul, who made the incredible, moving, propelling war musical Swing Kids in 2018, was finally back this year with the superhero comedy High Five. The film got delayed due to the pandemic and a drug scandal with one of the actors, but the finished product stands out as one of the best blockbusters of recent memory, mixing impressive superpowered set pieces with a lot of down-to-earth character work and humor that really enhances immersion. Japan released several blockbusters, such as the zany, colorful Cells at Work, a manga adaptation that delivers everything fans of the IP could hope for, and then some. The action is directed by renowned designer Takahito Ushi, whose work is not always ideally showcased by director Hideki Takeuchi, though the film as a whole remains a fun and funky tokusatsu. There were also several samurai period flicks, like Yu Irie's Samurai Fury and Kazuya Shiraishi's 11 Rebels, solid, large-scale epics that deliver a good mix of drama, political intrigue, and action. The films gain points on cinematography and performances, but nothing truly stands out in terms of pure kinetics, even though the directors do attempt to spice things up a bit with a cool one here and there. It's mostly competent commercial entertainment that serves its purpose, but won't have much staying power in the genre. As far as the Chinese-speaking industry is concerned, we were blessed with multiple big-budget, ambitious projects this year, and one old Chinese master even made his welcome return to the action genre. The Shadow's Edge is probably Jackie Chan's best film since The Foreigner back in 2017. Tense, well-paced, and supported by acrobatic younger performers, the film manages to make it look like Chan can still dish out punches with incredible agility despite his age. The stunt doubles are well hidden, and the editing used smartly enough to find an efficient balance between legibility and doubling requirements. It's nice to see Chan doing a solid police procedural with action flourishes once again. It should speak to fans nostalgic of the golden age of Hong Kong actioners. Speaking of Hong Kong, the peninsula's most ambitious and expensive production to date finally saw the light of day this year. Juno Max's Sons of the Neon Night, a project that had begun shooting 8 years ago and had to overcome multiple production problems like scheduling conflicts and pandemic-related delays. After Max's first feature, Rigor Mortis, proved to be a home run, expectations were high for Sons of the Neon Night, which was reported to be a fresh take on the classic triad tropes. Boasting an impressive all-star cast, the film premiered at Cannes, and the response was underwhelming to say the least. Let's hear what Chinese cinema specialist and critic James Marsh has to say about it.
Hi Alex, this is James Marsh from Hong Kong, and I just wanted to share a few thoughts about Juno Max's Sons of the Neon Night. It seems that from the outset what he wants to do essentially is make a Hong Kong movie unlike any film that we have seen from the region before. It's a very sort of highbrow, cerebral gangster yarn about a family, a huge crime family, kind of unraveling in the wake of the murder of their patriarch in a spectacular hospital bombing near the beginning of the film. Probably the single most spectacular action sequence is at the beginning, where a gang of masked terrorists descend upon the streets of Causeway Bay and just let rip with gunfire, just spewing randomly, taking out bystanders before they are eventually confronted by the cops, specifically by Lau Ching-wan's squad, and that ends sort of in a bloody melee. The neon-drenched urban landscape is similarly exaggerated so that visually it looks as much like sort of an anime movie as anything that we would see normally coming from Hong Kong. Now, although all of the action in Sons of the Neon Night is sort of gunplay, there is no sort of kung fu or other martial arts here. I think at the end of the day what you get is a film that wants to put visuals first. You should note that Juno Mac is also the production designer on this movie, and clearly that is where his priorities lie. Every frame of this movie looks absolutely spectacular. So this is more in line with something like Wong Kar-wai's The Grandmaster or even Ho Xiaoshen's The Assassin. This is a highbrow art house drama, really, more than a typical Hong Kong action movie. And I think action fans coming to this film may be left somewhat frustrated by the lack of dynamism in it, the lack of energy in it. This is a film that arguably, if I'm completely honest, takes itself a little bit too serious and has loftier ambitions than I think many of its fans would ask of it.
He's not from Hong Kong, nor does he still work there, but his name is synonymous with the industry's past glory. Legendary filmmaker Choi Hark made his return to the fantasy wuxiapian with Legend of the Condor Heroes, a job for hire that does outmatch most of the competition, even if it won't help to rekindle Choi's true rebel spirit. The director's best years are obviously behind him, and we are lucky to have his masterpieces from the 80s and 90s. But this new take on the classic Chinese tale, while suffering from weak writing, does contain a couple of action set pieces that prove Choi is still an incredibly clear-eyed master in cinematic kineticism. Rarely are the spatial relations between bodies and the shot composition so precise and fluid in such fantasy blockbusters. The final fight, of course, is an absolute delight, but the duel between Sabrina Zhuang and Zhang Yanqin features some camera movements that manage to be both dizzying and discreet, never becoming show-stopping displays of logistical prowess, but rather giving sense and weight to the characters' motions. Other Chinese fantasy blockbusters of 2025 include Wu Shan's Creation of the Gods Part 2, Demon Force, a delirious whirlwind of good CGI extravaganza that ups the ante on every imaginable level when compared to the first film. Within 20 minutes, the viewer has already witnessed a mystical energy battle in the immortal realm of Kunlun, a chase fight on top of two galloping horses next to the edge of a cliff, an electrical flying demon, and a liquid sword that turns into a giant metallic dragon. Based on one of the most important texts of Chinese literature, this second installment in the trilogy proves that its director can stay the course and deliver high-quality spectacle. We'll see if Part 3 sticks the landing. One of the weirdest and most endearing Chinese films of 2019, A Writer's Odyssey, finally got its sequel this year. Director Lu Yang stands as one of the most interesting filmmakers working in the industry today, after two ultra-kinetic Brotherhood of the Blades actioners and the slow-burn spy drama The Wind Blows from Longxi. His Writer's Odyssey saga mixes styles and universes to deliver an action fantasy that doubles as a commentary on art, its purpose, and how artists can find emancipation despite living in a constraining system. The writing, unfortunately, becomes a little too diluted in the third act, losing track of the story's emotional anchors. But the action is consistently spellbinding, relying on a solid understanding of how engaging it is for the audience to see brawls unfold in unexpected but logical ways. I'm not sure Part 2 contains any scene that matches the insanity of the one with the symbiote armor from Part 1, but it's still quite unique.
Time to cut you down to size!
I'd be remiss not to talk about the heaviest hitter at the box office that came from China this year, namely Ne Zha 2. This is one of the most dizzying, virtuoso pieces of computer animation to have ever filled the screens, giving life to a good mix of fun and adventure in this sequel that outmatches the 2019 film from director Yang Yu on every level. The original film was more geared toward younger kids, with perhaps a few too many fart jokes, but Part 2 gradually evolves to a more teenage-oriented coming-of-age story. You know, among literal gods of the martial world. The subtext about rebelling against the martial establishment is a nice unexpected plus. Animated action films from China were on fire this year, with two more noteworthy contenders. I Am What I Am 2, another sequel, built on the first film's moving story about Chinese dragon dance to veer toward martial arts and fighting tournaments. The fascinating plot about Chinese traditions trying to find their way and their place in modernity is augmented by no less than the best animated martial arts I have ever seen. Highly recommended. As for The Legend of Hei 2, yet another sequel, it is a jaw-dropping accomplishment of rich world-building and heart-pumping action. It dials everything the first film did right to 11, offering a coherent mix of Ghibli-esque aesthetics and Fog Hill of 5 elements like kinetics. With its perfect balance between exploration of its idiosyncratic diegesis and unbelievably fluid and legible supernatural fights, director MTJJ cements his place as a major voice in Chinese animation. I mean, come on, just look at this. I know, it feels like I'm going to run out of adjectives soon, but wait, there is more. Japanese animation was unsurprisingly not to be outdone, with both Demon Slayer, Infinity Castle and Chainsaw Man Razor Arc taking in massive wins at the box office and or with the fans. Continuing the stories developed in television and other animated films, the two anime blockbusters feature innovative masterful animation, and several awe-inspiring city-leveling scenes of extreme violence. Oh, was extreme violence just mentioned? If you like action movies, then you must have seen Havoc. The film marks the long-awaited return of prodigy filmmaker Gareth Evans, who took the world by storm years ago with Memento, The Raid, and The Raid 2. Havoc, starring Tom Hardy and with action design by Jude Poyer, had been years in the making and suffered from reshoot scheduling conflicts. It finally dropped on Netflix this year, and reception has been pretty divided amongst fans of the genre. I personally liked the way it looked and Hardy's subdued performance, and aside from the fake-looking car chase, was quite happy with the action design. The way Evans chose to capture it though is another matter, and I wasn't able to immerse myself into the nightclub shootout because of all those whip pans. The final cabin set piece is great, however. It's gnarly, full of control chaos, horror tropes, and intensity. The film suffers from writing and structural problems, but it remains a must-see for action fans this year, I think. Aside from Gareth Evans, other genre masters released new films. Donnie Yen himself directed and starred in The Prosecutor, a high production value court drama punctuated with blistering, painstakingly choreographed action set pieces. The opening sequence is perhaps the one that takes the most risks, with its startling, sometimes disorienting wonder, a scene in which the camera switches back and forth between third-person and first-person point of view FPS style. The result is not entirely successful, but also not uninteresting in its attempt at creating stronger immersion. Subsequent fights and chases are more conventionally filmed, but do offer a kinetic crescendo of violence, occasionally serving up memorable shots, like when Yen jumps down one level in a parking garage parkour style and the camera follows him down without cutting. The nightclub brawl stands out as a rare example of credible one versus many fight because of the way Yen uses his environment to handle and channel his opponents. The climatic action sequence set on a commuter train concludes the film on a high note, harnessing the power of editing to transform every shot into an essential building block to the scene's visual phrases. As far as the story is concerned, I could take it or leave it, but Yen sure proves he is still capable of kicking ass. Famous Indonesian genre filmmaker Joko Anwar's The Siege at Thorn High also came out in 2025. While not an all-out action film, it is a very tense, claustrophobic thriller that contains several extremely brutal scenes of body violence. It follows the story of a teacher who tries to put a bully in his place, but finds himself trapped, along with other students and colleagues, in the school while a national emergency is unfolding outside. The bully and his friends take advantage of the situation to exact vengeance. It's a pretty bleak, depressing film, but highly recommended. Timo Gianto, the other Indonesian genre master, went to the other side of the world to direct Nobody 2, a sequel to the Bob Odenkirk-led 8711-backed actioner from 2021. This time, our protagonist, Hutch, finds himself in all sorts of wacky action scenarios while on vacation with his family. Action is abundant and well executed, though not on the same level of violence and virtuosity as Timo's Indonesian films. Overall, it's a pretty solid and easy to watch actioner that delivers where we most expect it. However, I just cannot condone the pinball destroying scene. It's an Iron Maiden 2! Great game! Between that and TRON, 2025 has been a very challenging year for pinball fans at the cinema. Another sequel well worth mentioning is of course Last Bullet, the conclusion to the French action trilogy from director Guillaume Pierret, who wraps up his saga of explosive stunts and bone-crushing brawls. It's full of energy, generous, it revels in its genre-bound absurdity but is never cynical. It relies on established tropes of the French crime dramas and turns them into driving narrative forces for spectacular action. Stunt coordinator Manu Lenzi outdid himself with the tram fight, a three-way no-holds-barred fistfight that takes most of the year's output to school. As for Carsten's designer David Julien, he goes bigger, faster, louder, with unhinged vehicular mayhem. The French industry should be pumping out 3 or 4 films of this caliber every year. It should be obvious by now that 2025 saw more mid-budget crowd pleasers and DTVs succeed at delivering good action. Many industries in the world have released noteworthy mid-budget action films in 2025, and that includes Hollywood. The Predator franchise had never been so dynamic as it is today, with not 1, but 2 new films, and a brand new badass-looking pinball machine, namely Predator Badlands and Killer of Killers. The latter, an animated feature that tells 3 separate stories that eventually converge in the last act, suffers at times from weaker animation and a couple of shortcuts in the writing, especially compared to competition from Asia, but it ends up doing everything a film made by a fan for the fans should probably do. Badlands had a harder time convincing me, especially in terms of tone and the fact that I generally prefer iconic antagonists or archetypes to not get the protagonist treatment and remain somewhat mysterious and menacing. It's overall still quite entertaining, and you might just be more on the film's wavelength than I was. Other generous actioners came out this year, such as Love Hurts from Jonathan Ezobio, who has been working as a stuntman with 8711 for years. Ki Hui Kwan is a great actor and on-screen fighter, as demonstrating by Everything Everywhere, but also Red Pirate. With credentials like those, of course, the action scenes stand out as propelling and fun. Unfortunately, nothing else really works in the film, which failed to really have a lasting impact. Novocaine, starring Jack Quaid and Amber Midthunder, was another one featuring efficient fights and stunts, except it worked better thanks to the lead duo's performances and the way the film revels in exploring new ways to use its concept of the protagonist who cannot feel pain in the name of on-screen kinetics.
Hey man, you okay?
Speaking of concept films, Finnish director Jalmari Helander was back this year with a sequel to his swarmy killing machine period film Sisu. The follow-up, Road to Revenge, sees old man Atami continue his killing spree, swapping Nazis for Soviets when the man responsible for the death of his family is sent to finish the job. Helander learned all the right lessons from the first film, improving on pacing, writing, and most importantly editing to deliver an over-the-top, almost Looney Tunes-like actioner. The result is mostly very satisfying, with a couple of laugh-out-loud moments, even though I'm sure it could have gone even further in terms of comical violence.
You are a mistake, an aberration.
Add the commanding, silent acting performance from Jorma Tomila to the mix, and the only question that remains is, why would you deny yourself the pleasure? The directing duo behind the last 2 Bad Boys movies, Adil El Arbi and Bilal Fallah, went back to Belgium to make a sequel to their 2018 film Gangstas. This follow-up, called Gangstas with an S, reunites the same cast plus new faces to tell more of the drug war in Antwerp. The first half of the film is mostly gangster drama and a little bit of humor, while the second half shifts into higher gear, delivering several cool set pieces, including a long hotel shootout filmed as a Warner, and a coke-induced battle frenzy with animated flourishes. It's all very pop and doesn't take itself too seriously, and the action is consistently quite competent. Plus, it features a pinball machine that does not get trashed. Elsewhere in the world, mid-budget actioners thrived as well. In India, for instance, ultra-violent vigilante movies were seemingly all the rage, with movies like Hit, The Third Case, and Fateh, neither of which offer particularly compelling stories, though both revel in bloody carnage and end on over-the-top massacres. Not all are like that, however. Think of films like the beautifully shot, fast-paced and breezy Rifle Club. Shorter than most Indian genre films, it features competent enough action that could have been better, but is very elegantly directed, and the third act is devoted to the siege of said Rifle Club. The antagonist is played by the great Anurag Kashyap, who devours the screen with his presence. Kashyap, himself an iconic filmmaker, returned to genre fare this year with Nishaanchi, a more masala film than his few previous projects, but not quite an action film per se, as it is never so simple with him. It does utilize some of the genre tropes, however, sometimes in unexpected ways, like when a character is stabbed and unexpectedly manages to turn the tide on his opponent anyway, through sheer force of will. Playing with the genre tropes is also something done in Dehset Bey, or Mr. Dread, a Turkish film mixing various influences to deliver a hard-boiled romance that festival programmer extraordinaire Evrim Ersoy wanted to say a few things about.
The film I want to highlight is Dehset Bey, a Turkish comic book adaptation by Amazon Prime, based on the original comic by Murat Menteş and Kutlukan Peker. To be honest, I am not really recommend this film because of its leads, Barış Arduç and Tuğba Büyüküstün, who do a fine job, or the director, Mehmet Ata Öztekin, who is competent and polished and delivers a good product. But the film is too long, it's a little over melodramatic, perhaps a little slavishly dedicated to its original material. The reason why I want this to be seen by more people is the work by the action directors Tolga Değirmen, Uğur Doğan, and the fight choreographer Deniz Benol, because in 2 extended sequences they show us what Turkey is capable of. True, a little too dedicated or homage to John Wick, but there's still enough there for me to get excited, since we've not seen anything come from Turkish cinema like this all the way back when Panzehir came out. So go check it out on Amazon. Dehset Bey, well worth your time.
Korea had a few such productions this year. I Kill You, for example, an action-heavy film starring the great Kang Ji-young. The story is a bit whatever, and one can feel the budget's limitations, but director Yoo Ha, who had made the memorable Gangnam Blues in 2015, makes the most of his near single-location concept. The action is bountiful and adequately choreographed and filmed, though there are no real standout moments. Other recommendable 2025 Korean actioners include Ra Hee-chan's action comedy Boss, the story of how 2 heirs to a gangster empire who do not wish to take up the mantle must battle it out between themselves and with a third ambitious troublemaker. It is mostly a comedy, but the opening brawl efficiently foreshadows the epic closing set piece, a long, generous, at times hilarious melee and one of the most joyous action moments of the year. There was also Mantis, a spin-off of the 2023 film Kill Boksoon, which expands that universe by focusing on new characters. I'd rank it about the same as the first film, a decent enough little genre piece that could have benefited from more action and less drama. To round up the Korean overview, there was also The Old Woman with the Knife, which I quite liked, as it featured very well executed action scenes that leaned on the young versus old concept and offered a couple of really cool transitions to boot. The script could have been improved, as it becomes a little self-indulgent and goes on for too long in the end.
이제야 네 놈이 누군지 알겠네.
In Taiwan, Hun Chu-hwan, director of the 2018 surprise hit The Scoundrels, made his return with the Bomb on the Train action thriller in 96 minutes. It wasn't as captivating as the aforementioned film, but I did prefer it slightly to the other Bomb on the Train thriller of the year, namely Bullet Train Explosion from Junji Higuchi, maybe because 96 minutes contains an extremely gripping fist fight around the midway point. Several martial arts flicks made headlines in the action fandom this year, among them Malaysian fictionalized biopic Gayong, about the grandmaster and founder of Silat Galang Malaysia. The story is fine, at times interesting, but the narrative itself lacks dynamism and personality. The action choreo is quite good, even though the way it is filmed remains often too illustrative. The film does feature Yayan Ruyan in a supporting role, which is always a plus. Another martial arts fan's favorite, the one and only Scott Adkins, starred in 2 films released this year. The first, Diablo, is a high-end, high-standard DTV that makes the most of the always incredible Marco Zaror in a deliciously unhinged villainous role, and boasts top-notch action design throughout. Prisoner of War features another great performance by Atkins, but I thought the film lacked a strong antagonist, and the hero ends up defeating all of his opponents a little too easily in this one. The now long-standing Sniper DTV series continues to thrive with the 2025 release of Sniper: The Last Stand, the 11th entry in the franchise. I'm going to let Patrick Young, co-founder of Big Bad Film Fest, tell you why it might be worth your time.
My name is Patrick Young of Big Bad Film Fest. My movie this year that kicked absolute ass is Sniper: The Last Stand. I know what you're thinking, it's the 10th in the franchise, like, where really are we going with this? But Danishka Esterhazy has whipped up some real cool stuff. I've seen a lot of action movies in the last couple years that kind of end on a whimper, not this one. The last half hour hooks up the entire cast. Everybody gets their own individual little fight, very similar to Ballerina. You get to see a bunch of different fighting styles, a bunch of different weapons. Has my favorite knife and axe use this side of a key this year. Chad Michael Collins just continues to hold steady. The last 4 movies in this franchise are absolutely worth your time. Watch it.
I had already talked about it in last year's video, but since the film only got its wide release this year, I cannot omit Kensuke Sonomura's Ghost Killer, which was one of my favorite actioners of 2024. You can go back to the previous recap to hear my thoughts, and I'm gonna let my friend Derek take over here for a minute.
Hey everyone, Derek here. It is a pleasure and a privilege to be amongst you making this video. I've been thinking long and hard about the action film I was going to choose to talk about, and I think there's a single voice in action filmmaking these days that really appeals to me, that never ceases to really amaze me and find interesting ways to innovate, as well as bring something compelling to the table. And I think that voice is Kensuke Sonomura and his latest directorial effort, Ghost Killer. A lot has been said about Sonomura's unique brand of action design, his ways to choreograph movements that you've never seen before and at the same time feel incredibly grounded and human. But I think for me personally, it is his ability to choreograph not just the moments of fighting, but also the moments between the fighting. When the characters notice each other's tactics, they assess each other's strengths and weaknesses, and they plan ahead their next set of moves. And you can see that thinking sort of puzzle engage within their heads. And Sonomura, as a choreographer, he puts you directly into the mindset of those characters, and he finds ways to engage you not just emotionally but also intelligently throughout the fight. And I think that is something that is very unique as a fight choreographer for him to be able to do. And it comes from the vast knowledge of experience he's accumulated with so many different filmmakers and directors. And I think that going forward, that is going to be the defining thing for his action design and his style that many people will try to replicate. It's not just engaging the audience from a physical standpoint in the fight sequence itself, from the movements to the choreography to the camera work, but also the emotional content of the fight, as Bruce Lee would say. It's something truly groundbreaking, and I hope that we can see even more of it in the future being evolved upon. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy.
Open the door.
1 second!
James Madigan is another name that was already known of action movie fans for the work that he did as a second unit director on several Hollywood films, and he finally released his directorial debut this year with the zany Fight or Flight, starring Josh Hartnett, who spends the entire runtime killing off a plane load of assassins with water sprinklers, armrests, seat belts, champagne flutes, gets his ass whooped over and over again, gets his dick twisted, and ends up in an open brawl involving a chainsaw. Every conceivable way of hurting someone on a plane is used. It might not be a game changer, but the film is ludicrous and fun in a very old school 80s exploitation sort of way. One could say just the same of Steven Kostanski's Deathstalker, a remake of the cult 1983 sword and sorcery film. Your mileage will vary on this one if you're in it purely for the action, but with the great Daniel Bernhardt starring and so many monsters and practical effects, it should speak to your inner nostalgia for 80s B-movies. The 80s nostalgia was also pretty strong while watching The Sixth Robber, the new action gangster film from Chinese director Chris Huo. After making several direct-to-streaming actioners that stood out from the crowd, Huo was back this year with a stacked cast that included Philip Ng, Andy On, and the one and only Yuan Biao. Of course, Biao can no longer do the amazing acrobatic things he used to delight us with during the golden age of Hong Kong action cinema, but he does get to shine in a pretty cool car fight. The film as a whole is just fine, however, not really delivering the level of astonishment one could expect from such a skilled stunt team. 2025 was a quiet year for Chinese DTVs, with fewer remarkable releases in the action genre. My favorite was hands down Li Bingwang's Killer of Swordsmen, also known as Drunken Blade internationally. Li released the incredibly unhinged fighter 2 years ago, and I'm glad he chose to tackle the wuxia genre with this new movie. The star and director clearly has an eye for striking images, and often comes up with unusual or dynamic ways to film action. No doubt it will be too much for some viewers, but it does align with a modern trend of stacking up layers of dynamism in the choreography, framing, and directing. The sometimes elliptical editing even reminded me of Ching Siu Tunga times, which is never a bad thing. Granted, the execution is not 100% perfect, but the manic energy makes it a very pulpy, memorable watch in my book. There was no shortage of pulpy films this year, not least of which Troll 2, a sequel to the Norwegian monster film that came out in 2022. Taking a bigger, louder approach, this second installment now features more than one giant creature roaming around. Does the film make the most of its premise? Well, I was honestly expecting a little bit more troll action, but if you're in the mood for a laid-back adventure film that was made by an obvious fan of sci-fi and monsters, you could do worse. Another franchise that became suddenly more pulpy and actiony than before was Megan, with this year's sequel Megan 2.0 leaving almost all horror tropes behind in favor of a more hard-hitting experience. I have not seen the first one, so can only judge the sequel on its own terms, and it was fine if a little silly. The AI takeover and double-crossing infused plot gives way to multiple set pieces that clearly illustrate the director's appetence for kick-ass action scenes. Speaking of which, several contenders for most unexpectedly spectacular action movie of the year came from international shores. One of my absolute favorites was Gabriele Mainetti's La Città Proibita, or The Forbidden City, a beautiful love letter to Italian mafia films, romance, and kung fu flicks, which stars the revelation of the year, the incredible, charismatic, and spellbinding Yasiel Yu. I could go on for a while about the film, but the Shogun Supreme himself is here to get you the lowdown. Over to you, Frankie.
Hello everyone, I am Frankie Balboa, also known as the Shogun Supreme. Alex, thanks for having me once again for this year's Action Cinema Highlights. And one of the films that is part of my top 10 action film, but also made it to my top 5, is The Forbidden City, directed by Gabriele Mainetti, who has done a few short films and a couple of the directorial efforts, but the one that stood out from his filmography is They Call Me Jack the Robot, which is a superhero type of film. And the stunts in this movie from Forbidden City is done by EA Stunts, which is composed of a lot of industry veterans straight out of Italy, and the experience goes all the way back to the 2002 film Equilibrium. Now this film stars Zashi Liu. This is her first starting role, but she is a vet in the industry as a stunt performer. Has done stuff for Mulan in 2020 for Disney and the Japanese film franchise Kingdom. Now with all that said, the action in this film is very dynamic, it's very brutal, and you see barely any cuts. A beautiful portrayal of the way Rome looks, and I love the supporting cast, especially how the villains are portrayed. That gives you that old school element of how they exaggerate it in the way we are used to from the 80s and 90s Hong Kong cinema, or even stuff that we got in the West, especially in America. I had a blast watching this film, and I'm looking forward to what else the director has got cooking, and also the lead actress, because she definitely stood out and did a well job with her acting skills. She has a lot of range, so I could see her definitely succeeding in the industry. This is currently streaming on Netflix Italy, and Vogo USA picked up the distribution rights for the US. You guys have a great new year, and enjoy looking for the films that are being mentioned in this very video.
Another hard-hitting, ass-whooping surprise was Blood Brothers, a film about, well, brotherhood, betrayal, gangsters, family, and violence. This is a massive step up from director Siathik Yusuf's previous efforts, with intense pace, predictable but satisfying beats and payoffs, charismatic actors, sleek action design from the Defenders stunt team, and legible, dynamic camera work. Nothing we've never seen before, and often uninspired in the writing, but a great example of the heightened style of action that has defined the decade so far. I was also very pleasantly surprised with Dominic Arun's Loka Chapter 1, a Malayalam production that mixes mythological tropes and superhero archetypes to deliver a satisfyingly balanced narrative, enhanced with a couple of action scenes that stand out because of how clear-eyed, striking, and meaningful they are for the film's fantasy setting. The action in the forest flashback scene, for instance, successfully translates the intoxicating feeling that comes with power as the heroine discovers her abilities. A saga to keep an eye out for. The now legendary Iko Uwais, star of the Raid saga and The Night Comes For Us, among others, officially launched his own film studio this year, which has already released 2 feature films. The first one, an all-out martial arts cinematic carnage, premiered at Fantastic Fest and is directed by Siddhartha Tata, a young and very prolific genre filmmaker. I have not seen Ikatandara, or Blood Ties as the film is known internationally, but thankfully, I do know someone who has. Let's hear it from Austin King.
Hi, my name is Austin King, and I'm here to tell you about one of the best action movies of the year, the fantastic Ikatandara. This comes from Iko Uwais' new production effort to invest in the Indonesian martial arts action space, and is one of 2 major projects that he has touring the world right now. Ikatandara is a really fun, bloody revenge thriller. A martial arts athlete is tasked with saving her brother after he ends up on the wrong side of a gang of dope pushers. In that time, she's forced to face with the horrible things that this group is doing to her community, as well as the commitment that she has to her own family. The action in this film is incredibly stellar, really focusing on bare-knuckle bloody brawls, oftentimes in streets and in warehouses. And of course, Iko Uwais is the final villain in this bloody showdown, and you'll get to see him go toe-to-toe with our trio of heroes. Seeing Iko use choreography focused on his strengths as a performer, the way that his body moves so solidly and built, allows him to be a wall that the other actors throw themselves against, and as he throws them around the room itself. It's a real blast, and I can't wait for you to check it out.
As I mentioned earlier, this is not the only film released by Iko Uwais Studio this year. The second one, Timur, is a war movie based on actual events and directed by the action star himself. It just opened in Indonesian cinemas a few days ago, but luckily for us, a friend of mine was able to see it ahead of its release. Brandon, the stage is yours.
Hey there, my name is Brandon Streisning, and I'm a film journalist based in New York City, and I'm here to talk to you today about Timur, the directorial debut by Iko Uwais. Now, before I get into, Iko and the film and, his style as a director, I kind of want to touch on something that I think is important because I think as modern action fans, we try to be a little more sensitive to things like this. We look back at, the films that we loved growing up and can talk about, how they maybe haven't aged well in certain ways and how action still feels a little regressive in many ways. And what I mean by that is, I think if you're going to be an action fan, a fan of, all kinds of action cinema, and this is especially true of American action and Hong Kong action, there's not only a nationalist streak within these films, I think there's an inherently fascistic streak in a lot of them. The idea of a one lone man can save us, one lone man with a gun. You kind of got to remove that part of your brain. And I think, unfortunately, Timur, when it comes out, will be faced with a lot of those criticisms because it is very much an Indonesian nationalist film. And I think that's fine. I mean, I think people are going to attack it in certain ways that they don't attack American action films with, and that's kind of why I'm addressing this here, because I think if you're going to do one, you got to focus on the other. And I think that that's important. It's based on a real hostage crisis from 1996, overseen by Indonesia's modern president, current day president. That is the backdrop for this film, and I think it's important to talk about it, and I think you kind of gotta navigate these waters a little bit and just realize that it's part and parcel with action cinema. All of that said, what a blast this is, and I think it's going to surprise action fans because it's not what you're expecting from Iko. You hear that the star of The Raid is directing his own movie, and I think you probably sit back and you're like, wow, this is going to be a martial arts barn burner. And that's certainly there. I mean, he kicks a lot of ass in this movie. The fights are great. I mean, of course they are. But more than anything, as a director, he's very quiet. He allows you to sit in moments of pain, and I think Iko is a great actor for that. He's not always allowed to exploit the fact that he is a very good actor because he is such a dynamic martial artist. He's one of the greatest we've ever seen. But this being his directorial debut, it being sort of a passion project for him, I like that he kind of swerves away from, not letting it be a martial arts showcase for himself. He has a whole body of work to do that, and I think he feels comfortable within his own ego to allow himself to say, hey, you've seen me do this in a million movies, you've seen The Raid, you've seen Beyond Skyline, you've seen The Night Comes for Us. So what I'm going to do here is show you that I can act, and I can use guns too, because there's a lot of great gunplay in this. I think if you're going into Timor expecting The Raid 3, you got to get those expectations in check. I think this is much more of Iko's Rambo in many ways, and if you can get that out of your mind and really go in with the right expectations, I think you're going to dig it. It's a very accomplished directorial debut, and I think it really shows that he's worked behind great filmmakers, like Timo, like Liam O'Donnell, like Gareth, these guys who laid a groundwork for him that he could work behind, watch their styles, and then kind of, adopt his own. This movie looks great, looks fantastic. It's very low budget, which is to be expected, but it looks great. I think that it's a nice little gem in Iko's filmography where I don't think you're going to come away saying that's up there with The Raid, that's up there with Beyond Skyline. Of course not. You're at least going to come away and say, wow, that guy can direct, and I can't wait to see what he does next, and I'm so glad that he's branching off and doing other things.
In Kazakhstan, director Darkan Tuleginov made a little-seen film called Zaza, or Retribution. It will no doubt face censorship in some countries because of its themes, as the movie is all about rape, police corruption, hopelessness, and violence. In this near-dystopian vision of Kazakhstan, the director tells the story of a small-town, morally corrupt officer who finds out that his daughter was raped by his boss, the chief of police. His uncontrollable anger leads him to take the chief hostage and fight off a whole police station of cops, while also trying to mend his relationship with his daughter. Tuleginov adopts a naturalistic filmic approach and delivers a heap of messy, brutal, nasty fights and shootouts. Although there is nothing really mind-blowing kinetically speaking, I must say that the rage and desperation on display give the action a weight seldom movies manage to carry. It's a shame the cinematography is so dark in some of the scenes, because Zaza truly stands as one of the most feel-bad actioners of the year, and I hope it will get more exposure in the coming months.
Félicitations, John. Mission accomplie. Vous pouvez rentrer à la base, mon cher.
Affirmatif.
Every year, gems such as Zaza can be found in the small-budget indie space. Several drastically different films took me by surprise this year, the most striking of which was Reflection in a Dead Diamond, from directing duo Ellen Katey and Bruno Forzani, who have built a solid career as experimental fringe fetishistic filmmakers. While not strictly speaking an action movie, there is quite a bit of action in Reflection, and it is all magnificent. An exploration of the aesthetics of genre cinema distilled to their purest form through laser-focused shot compositions and razor-sharp editing. It's never about kinetics, but about the sensory, tactile, near-physical rewards of what genre can bring in all its diversity. The Eurospy film, martial arts films, the Giallo, and so on. All other aspects of the film are an equally satisfying exercise in aesthetic and trope reconfiguration. It will not click with everyone, but when it does, it's an experience like no other. The Martial Club boys were back again this year with Gladiator Underground, a pretty standard tournament film elevated by stratospheric fight choreographies. There is nothing in here for non-action fans, but the team, including director Chaya Supanarat, already show considerable improvement compared to last year's Bangkok Dog. The action design is very stimulating, and even seems a little over the top at times, adding movements that distract the eye from the main action, but it is always quite pleasurable to look at. Let's go even smaller budget with Nick Pelikai's Penance, a $7,000 feature that was shown in sort of an incomplete state at Fantastic Fest with several pacing and audio issues. But, and that's a big one, the film opens on a 9-minute action scene that outclasses a lot of action movies. Two men break into a warehouse and start killing their way through a myriad of enemies. Bodies bump and roll all over their speeding car, bones break in unison under unrelenting assaults. The driver takes out the steering wheel and uses it as a weapon. A crowbar is shoved up someone's ass, and then it just goes on with a dizzying wonder set in the corridor that goes back and forth through whip hands between the two brothers, each handling their own group of opponents. It's a raw symphony of carnage that runs on pure energy. For all 9 exhilarating minutes of this scene, it feels like Penance will be unstoppable, the perfect avatar of the heights micro-budget actioners can reach. We look forward to what Pelikai manages to cook up next with a bigger budget. In Argentina, Christian Tapia Marchiori's Gatillero, or Gunman, turned out to be a very solid, real-time urban thriller about an ex-con who immediately falls back into crime and unwillingly becomes the catalyst to a neighborhood rebellion against the local drug dealers. Presented entirely as a one-er, it shows how quickly things can escalate. The approach amps up the tension, and the film even portrays the city streets as deserted, except when violence takes over, which reminded me a little of the aesthetics of Golden Era Johnny To. Several low-budget indies from Japan are worth mentioning. First, Hiroyuki Tsuji's Isolated employed the great Koichi Sakamoto's action design work to deliver a no-hold-barred 80-minute multi-layered action blast. It's a spin-off to a very long-running DTV saga, but there is no need to have seen any of the other installments to watch this one. It offers simple pleasures: bad guys, worse guys, flashbacks, and a warehouse. Koichi Sakamoto has been keeping busy, as he always does. The man also directed the brisk, action-packed and quirky Shogun's Ninja, as well as the excellent Tatsujin Warriors, about which my friend Justin Declue has more to say.
I'm a huge fan of action choreographer, director Koichi Sakamoto. I think he is one of the best guys working in the stunt designing world these days, but he mostly works in tokusatsu genre, and he does a lot of stuff, TV shows, movies, and I can't do the commitment of watching all of those. So anytime that I see he does things that are out of the suit, especially if it's movies, I get very excited. Which brings me to Tatsujin Warriors, which feels like a passion project for Koichi Sakamoto, where he gets a bunch of martial arts performers, some of them who have never appeared in front of the camera before, to do a pure fighting movie. It's got a light tone, very comedic, but it's just fight after fight after fight. Just stripped bare, but done in the perfect Sakamoto way. And it's a rare chance for Hoshimi Asai, who has done stunt work behind the scenes. She also appeared as one of the baddies in Kitamura's Versus with short hair, shows up as the lead of this film. But even then, she's on the poster. It's really an ensemble piece, just like an old school fighting movie. Just different flavors of fighting in big warehouses or big empty buildings, just anywhere that's good for having a great fight. And if you're keeping track of Sakamoto, he has another film that he action choreographed and probably ghost directed called Isolated that came out this year, and it's very similar in that it's fight, 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 fight. That film, Isolated, is like the serious version of Tatsujin Warriors because they use the same locations, they use some of the same actors, which makes me think that maybe they shot concurrently. You had the serious film, Isolated, and then you had the more sillier Tatsujin Warriors, and you can feel Sakamoto stretching himself on both of them, doing what he does best in a way that he rarely gets to do, because he's always doing those Kamen Rider, Ultraman, or whatever other Takatsu job he can get. Highly recommend as just a straight fighting movie.
Okay, let me just bend the rules here for a minute. The next film is not a 2025 release, though I did discover it this year. It was shown in Japan in 2021, but seemingly did not get a release anywhere else after that, not even a Japanese one on physical or streaming. Yuki Kobayashi self-produced an indie action satire named Wings of the Abyss, which tells the tale of a salaryman who feels like he is slowly dying, crushed by the system. He decides to become a skater and joins a skating gang, so to speak, only to have to face various enemies of skateboarding. It's a micro-budget film that turns the rage induced by an inhuman system into the energy needed to create a counterculture. The film eventually slides into action territory, with corporate goons repeatedly attacking the skaters with impunity. Formally, it has its limitations, but it is a punk film that clearly loves the skating culture and pays homage to it without idealizing it. I hope it eventually finds its way onto people's screens. One of the villains in Wings of the Abyss is played by Masayuki Ino, known in Japan for his role of the legendary assassin Kunioka. The Kunioka saga is one of the things director Yugo Sakamoto is famous for in his native country, in addition to the now internationally recognized Baby Assassins franchise, of course. The Kunioka films are mockumentaries, in which Sakamoto chronicles the everyday life of a professional assassin. This research supposedly leads to the creation of the Baby Assassins movies. We've already mentioned 2 of the Kunioka movies on the channel, and the latest chapter in the story, called Flame Union, premiered in Japan a few weeks ago. No idea if we'll ever see it in the rest of the world, but Michael, from the Compendium of Discomfort podcast, lives in Japan and has seen it.
You might know Yugo Sakamoto as the director of the Baby Assassins, but around the same time he started telling the story of the legendary hitman Kunioka, and this series has now already 7 movies, 3 mainline titles, 4 spin-offs, and these 3 mainline titles are the legendary hitman Kunioka, Green Bullet, and this year Flame Union. It's kind of a mockumentary, a buddy movie, action comedy, a lot of dudes hanging out and doing silly things, and it's a lot of fun. The series tends to have like one big action scene at the end. This one has one at the start, one at the end, one in the middle, and it's very well choreographed. It's very dual focused in this one, and it's a lot of fun, and it should be released in the rest, but so far nothing confirmed. Let's see.
A few honorable mentions in passing, because the year has indeed been rich. The films of Kazakh producer and actor Timur Bakhtibey are starting to be seen outside the country's borders. Timuchin, also known as Kung Fu Rookie, toured a couple of festivals and released online, while his newest one, Super Courier, premiered in England a few weeks ago. They are love letters to the work of Jackie Chan and Golden Harvest, and even if the quality isn't quite there yet to be comparable to the idols, seeing such enthusiasm for Hong Kong action cinema is always exciting. There was also the 1927 set Russian-Chinese co-production Red Silk, which is just fine, but does include a lengthy 2-train action set piece. In India, the spoof movie Badass Ravi Kumar made a little bit of a splash with this funny reappropriation of masala cinema tropes, though your mileage may vary, as the spoof sometimes isn't that far removed from the real thing. The French studio Inoxy, behind the Lost Bullet trilogy, also released The Orphans, also starring Alban Lenoir, from director Olivier Schneider, who has a long and accomplished career as a stunt professional. The result is pretty decent, though it does take ages for the film to get going, and I feel they could have gone bigger with the stunts. It's encouraging though. Hopefully, Inoxy can keep churning out action movies. Before we move on to the most important actioner of next year, let's take a few moments to mention non-action films that contain notable action set pieces. Alappuzha Gymkhana is a Malayalam language sports drama about a group of youngsters who decide they should learn boxing in order to qualify for college. The film was directed by Khalid Rahman, who had given us the great Talumala in 2022 and is a delightful coming-of-age tale that includes extremely stimulating boxing matches captured and edited in a uniquely dynamic way.
I really get divorced. Please don't say that.
More surprising was Michelangelo Covino's romantic comedy Splitsville, which happens to have one of the best on-screen fights of 2025. The scene, which is quite long, is not about spectacular moves, but about raw anger and stamina, and the messiness that comes with drawn-out fights. The two actors did everything themselves, and obviously took great pleasure in destroying as much of their environment as they could.
God damn it! Viva la revolution!
And on top of all that, one of the most important American filmmakers of our time managed to fit in a couple of heart-pumping set pieces in his latest film, one battle after another. But let me pass the mic to the one and only Ross Peacock, also known as Rossatron, to tell you more about that.
I don't make videos anymore, really partially due to being on my own journey as a filmmaker and discovering more and more just how much contemporary creatives are increasingly hamstrung by budget and especially time on set. It is hard to want to criticize something you know the filmmakers most likely were aware of or tried to accomplish but simply were unable to or even had taken from them in post and changed. The other reason though is simply the lack of invention I see in action cinema. I haven't really seen anything that felt new in the realm since the releases of Fury Road and John Wick. That feeling of seeing someone do something you hadn't really seen before. I sort of felt that I had run out of things to talk about. And then I saw one battle after another. Now, some will question whether this is even an action film, but the familiar finale car chase is something I haven't seen quite approached as it is here before. The combination of music, camera work, and generous pacing, along of course with something we see very little of nowadays, making such integral use of a true physical location. The way the camera lets the cars come into view, tightly editing between three specific perspectives and of course a fourth wider perspective, ours, creates this build of tension that is less about danger. I don't think anyone expects to see the death of the father or daughter characters, and more about the desire to see just how this tale will climax. Of course, it brings to the fore another sadly often overlooked part of action cinema: storytelling. We have spent time with these characters. We have seen and understood their dynamic, their very clear but not incredibly obvious wants and needs. The life that DiCaprio had once chosen has physically caught up here with his daughter, with themes of parenthood incredibly important to this narrative overall. It is up to him to protect her from the horrors of the world he has long said existed, but became too complacent to manage beyond his own younger years. Action should move the story forward. It should not be action for action's sake. And if you can make the images themselves thematically relevant, as they are here, then your action will become energized with great substance. If you can do it with characters you care about, you'll give it great tension. And if you can do it with genuine invention and creativity, physically, you will fill us with great excitement.
Alright, I've done my best to delay the inevitable, but it cannot be helped. The truth must come out. The most kinetic and cinematic actioner that I've seen this year is, of course, Kenji Tanigaki's The Furious. It premiered in Toronto, where I was able to travel to and watch it, before doing a couple of other festivals like Busan, Sitges, or Beyond Fest. Kenji Tanigaki is of course a legend in the industry, a Japanese stuntman, choreographer, action designer, and director who studied in Japan and Hong Kong, where he worked a lot with Donnie Yen. He designed the sword fights in the Rurouni Kenshin movies, directed Yen's Enter the Fat Dragon, and worked on many fan favorites from behind the scenes. With The Furious, he gathered an impressive cast of skilled martial performers like Xie Miao, Joe Taslim, Heian Huyan, Joey Iwanaga, and Brian Lee, with a simple goal: to deliver the ultimate action film. Ambitious, I know, but he might actually have pulled it off. Because the film acts as a culmination of the last 3 decades of action cinema, there are things in The Furious that we've seen before. The film builds on them and tweaks them and expands them to offer things we've never seen before. People have never moved like that on screen. Fist fights have never looked so propelling and dynamic. The choreography is beautiful, fast, brutal, but also precise, a demonstration of action cinema expertise, the likes of which are rarely seen. I won't say any more. I'm sure you'll find reviews from other action fans who are just as enthusiastic about it. Lionsgate has acquired worldwide rights, so The Furious will be coming to cinemas in 2026. I cannot wait to watch it again and to marvel some more at how it pushes the boundaries of the genre. Pushing boundaries seems to me like it was the main driving force for certain action movies this year. With The Furious, of course, but also many other productions. La Città Proibita took the Italian mafia genre to places it had never explored. Last Bullet propelled contemporary French action cinema to new heights. Several major Chinese animated films displayed a sense of kineticism that went further than ever before. Singular artists, such as Hélène Catet and Bruno Forzani, utilized everything the medium has to offer to transcend budgetary constraints and shape genre cinema to their will. Such works are a testament to the vitality of the genre and are backed up by an armada of more straightforward, classically made but equally enjoyable actioners like Diablo, High Five, or The Prosecutor. Veterans and big names such as Donnie Yen, Kenji Tanigaki, Gareth Evans, Timo Gianto, and Choi Hark continue to work within the genre, while new talent is emerging year after year, promising a bright future for action cinema. On the international scene, multiple industries are delivering must-sees at a steady pace, with China, Japan, and India leading the charge, while 2025 saw several gems emerging from Europe, Southeast Asia, Kazakhstan, and Argentina. Action cinema can be many things, but above all, it will always be the most universal language for cinematic emotion. As I said at the start of this video, my goal is not to be exhaustive. There are major actioners that came out in 2025 that I chose not to mention. Maybe I didn't like them. Maybe I didn't have anything interesting to say about them. Or maybe I didn't have a chance to watch them yet. But that's precisely the beauty of the genre. With such effervescence and dynamism worldwide, there truly is something for everyone. It's time to wrap up, so let me say thank you to all my guests. It's always a pleasure hearing your thoughts on some of these films. Links to their channels and social media are in the description. And of course, thank you for watching this video to the end. Don't hesitate to like, share, and leave a comment. Your feedback on the video and your thoughts on action films are always welcome. I hope you discovered a couple of films you had not heard of before. 2026 promises to be yet another exciting year for action cinema, with a new Street Fighter movie, Ma Dong-seok set to play the antagonist to Prabhas in Spirit, a sequel to 8711's Violent Night, Mortal Kombat 2, and many others. See you then.